Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 30, Pishke Business. As per usual, we'll start with a sort of brief summary of the episode. Fran's monthly tour of the Sheffield home for her mother's canasta group is interrupted by Ben Vereen, who Maxwell has convinced to star in a show 20 years in the making, assuming, of course, that Maxwell can get the financing worked out. Sylvia's canasta group, obviously impressed with Ben Vereen's involvement, offers to invest their winnings into the show. Maxwell and Cece less than graciously accept their $25,000. The main investor targeted is Charles Haste, a man who made zillions in waste management. Maxwell is, to borrow Fran's simile, like a virgin on his wedding night waiting for Charlie's arrival. Because Charlie fancies himself something of a ladies' man, Maxwell intends to rely heavily on Cece, who arrives in a great mood, having just beaten a tourist to a cab. Literally. When Charlie arrives, he explains that he had more trouble getting to the Sheffield home than he did getting through the birth canal, because some large blonde woman kneed him in the groin and clobbered him with a hideous green umbrella. Connecting the dots, Niles hides Cece's umbrella and Maxwell proposes keeping the arrangement between us boys. Charlie rejects that proposal out of hand, leading Fran to pose as Miss Babcock. Hilarity for the audience ensues. Obviously taken by Fran, Charlie promises to give her a check for $500,000 at dinner the next night. At Cece's apartment the next night, Cece, and then Cece and Maxwell, are hidden in the coat closet listening to the conversation between Charlie and Fran, and learn that Charlie is doubling his investment in the show. Charlie then proposes cutting Maxwell out because Cece was the brains, while Maxwell was just a pretty face and blazer, at least according to Cece. Fran is upset that Cece said that and rejects Charlie's offer because Mr. Sheffield is a man of vision and integrity. Maxwell, holding Charlie's coat, leaves the closet to throw out the trash, kicking Charlie from Cece's apartment. Cece, who is unable to let $1 million investment go, she pops out of the closet, beckoning Charlie to hear a really funny story. Maxwell updates Sylvia on the new show's investment and how he is investing his own money in it, which is a change of pace. After telling Sylvia that Fran turned down one of the richest men in the country out of loyalty to him, Sylvia, needless to say, reacts poorly. And that's that. Do you have anything you want to add, Bernadette?
You did a very good job at the summary. There's a couple of things I want to discuss as we go through the episode in terms of interpretation of certain stuff.
Ooh, me too.
So I'll just put a pin in that for that.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. I'm sorry the summary was a bit longer than usual, but I couldn't figure out what to cut. I tried to keep our summaries to under 300 words, and this one was 378, so give or take. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes. So we open in the living room, and Brighton and Maggie are there playing, but they hear an "oh my god" in the background. And oh no, they realize that Fran's doing her monthly tour for her mother's canasta group. And Gracie comes in going, "Cover your teeth." And the
Cheeks.
children. Oh, that makes a
Sorry.
lot more sense. That makes a lot more sense. I was like, teeth.
Yeah, what is she doing when she comes in?
I mean, her hands are next to her mouth, but it's her cheeks, so okay. Anyway, and so the children are trying to run away from the back of the living room. They come in from, again, the general. Again, it's hard to describe what the layout of the Sheffield home is since it seems to just rearrange itself. But supposedly from like the back part of the kitchen, back hallway, that type of area. I don't know. They come in. Fran's showing off the piano that was once played by the person who played The Way We Were,
Marvin Hamlish.
And again, there's Sylvia has a camera, like the type you would have to actually take the film to get
a real camera.
Real camera. And it's funny because she actually goes up to take a picture of Niles as he's, cleaning the windows. And she explains it's because her girl doesn't do windows. Like her, I'm assuming, like part-time help.
Yeah, the
Doesn't
cleaning
really
girl
know.
that was probably the one referenced
Yeah.
in season 1. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. And so she wants to prove that, it's not a big deal, And then Niles kind of like plays along with Sylvia in terms of like kind of like faux flirting with her, like meet me in the kitchen and I'll clean behind the refrigerator.
Yes.
Yes. So again, Fran's in the midst of all these older ladies, showing them around and saying, oh, well, like Sylvia mentions all these famous people in and out. It's a wonder that Fran, still so down to earth. And Fran's like, oh, people are people. We're all the same. And then in walks Mr. Sheffield with Ben Vereen.
Mm.
And of course, immediately after saying people are people, we were all the same. Oh my God, Ben Vereen, do roots, do roots. And of course, Max was like, oh, so sorry. This is, he introduces Fran and Sylvia, but then to the rest of the ladies, he's like, the 1948 Israeli luge and then Fran again is still so excited to meet Ben Vereen and is like, do Pippin, do Pippin. Um, and so again, this is all after saying we're all the same. Cece comes in, and she's actually classic Cece, not very cognizant of how you usually treat other people. She's saying coming through, pushing through the people. Um, And of course, Niles has to make a crack about how she can ride in the basket with Toto because she's falling after Ben Vereen. Uh, but anyway, Ben Vereen's basically like on his way out. He's been talking with Maxwell about doing a show that Maxwell's been thinking about for like 20 years or so.
Hmm.
And um, and again, as soon as he leaves, and of course, I believe it's Fern yelling out after him, "I love you!" And turning to the rest. Well, you see, people are people. Um,
And then what does she do?
yes. So Ben Vereen, when he had first walked in on the scene, had a teacup
Yes.
and with the little saucer, and he put it down on the little table near the front door. And so, of course, she's like, "Don't touch that; it's mine." Uh, and referencing the teacup.
Right. He
But
touched
and
that. It's mine.
yes, don't touch that. It's mine. So the ladies are very impressed with having seen Ben Vereen, and they kind of talk to each other. And then Sylvia's mother, that Sylvia says to Fran, "Okay, they want to invest the Pishke into the play," and she's like, "Are you sure?" Like they're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And so they kind of turn to where Maxwell and Cece are, and they push forward a little old lady who we find out is Frida.
Yep.
And Fran, of course, just says, "Oh, they want to give you the Pishke." And Maxwell looks at this lady, and oh, she seems like a wonderful lady
Right.
because she has no idea what Pishke means.
Correct.
And we introduced she's Frida. She's the one who keeps track of the winnings when they play cards. And
Right.
they explain they would like to invest into the show. And at first, Maxwell's like, "Oh no, no," like, and Cece's kind of like, "How much would they even have?" But then she opens it up, and it's $25,000. So of course, both Maxwell and Cece at that point are more than happy to take the $25,000 for the show.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But yeah,
Um,
I just thought it was funny, because again, that kind of culture communication lapse where Fran's like, they want to, they want to give you the Pishki, and of course, you know, Maxwell has no idea what she's talking about, assumes it's the little lady in front of him.
correct. I want to come back to that in our future fun segment.
Okay.
So,
Was there anything you wanted to add to that scene?
I'm just going through my notes. So, I'll just, you sort of touched on this, but, as Ben Vereen is leaving, Maxwell says to him, this show has been a passion of mine for 20 years. And now with you, we have a surefire hit on our hands.
Ah, yes, that becomes key later on.
Yeah. Um, I think that's that. And then, of course, I just want to put a little bit more color on how, after Fran says they want to give you their pishki, Cece says, oh, goody, we're made, in this like very condescending way. And
Yeah.
Maxwell tries to like step in and is like, what my partner means to say is, well, we couldn't possibly, and she accept, and she's like $25,000, and he says, you're in. Like they were both going to reject their money until,
Yeah.
they determined how much it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
because they've been saving it for a couple of years, right? Like Fran mentions to Sylvia, "Are you sure you haven't touched that money?" And
no, Fran says, don't be too fast and loose with your pishki. And Sylvia's like, what do you mean? It hasn't been touched in years.
ah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, that's how you get $25,000 from playing cards, unless you're, playing for a lot of money. But I get the sense they weren't.
yeah.
That's all I wanted to add. Shall I?
Take us to the next scene.
I would love to. So it's the night that Mr. Charles Haste is going to be coming to the house, and there's sort of excitement, if you will, in the air. And so Niles brings out, food, and it's not a lot of food. It's a small little tray, and Fran comments on that, like, that's the spread you're putting out for this big investor. And, Niles explains it's beluga caviar. I don't remember how much he said per ounce, but it was a lot of money per ounce.
$100.
Thank you. I thought it was $100, but in my head I was like, it couldn't possibly be that much. But okay, it was $100 an ounce. And Fran's like, shopping tip, Price Club. Did she say lungfish or whitefish? Whatever, some other cheaper fish.
Yeah.
$1.99 a pound. You can fill up your whole bathtub. And Fran explains that, because her mother's invested in the show, she wants the investor walking out of here with his pants spread and Alka-Seltzer foaming out of his mouth. Like, she wants this to go really well. And then, of course, Maxwell comes in. He also wants things to go not just well. He wants everything to be perfect. And he also comments on how little food Niles put out. And Fran can't help herself from saying, told you so. But so Maxwell, again, doubles down on, I want everything to be perfect. I've been wanting to do the show since the beginning of my career. And now finally Cece has found an investor who shares my vision. Well, what does the investor do? And Niles says he's a garbage man. And of course, Maxwell feels the need to add that he's very, very wealthy and very acclaimed. So like boosting his bona fides, if you will. And Fran says, oh, Mr. Sheffield, look at you. You seem like a virgin on our wedding night. Not that I would know. And they look at her. That's because I've never been married. I kind of want to stop there and talk about that sentence. Is that one of the things you wanted to talk about? Or am I just like out on a limb? Okay. Can we just talk about it briefly?
Yeah.
So every time, I've clearly watched this episode more times than I can count. Almost every time I've watched it, I've thought of her comment, like her additional comment of, that's because I've never been married, to mean something. And now I'm not sure. Is she saying, like, is she trying to indicate that it's not just that she's never been married, but also she's a virgin, or is she just ignoring that the virginity?
Yeah, I think the joke they're going for is that like everybody's aware she like the audience knows she's not a virgin, and so when she first says, I wouldn't know about that, you would think she's saying it because she's not a virgin, but of course she does the more unexpected part of it by saying I've never been married. I think it's more of the like a comedy thing.
Okay, see, that's
like the unexpected.
See, watching it more recently, that is what I thought she meant. But when I was younger and watching it, I thought she was trying to capture both. That not only has she not been married, but she's a virgin. So of course, like, she's not married, so of course she's a virgin. Which, as we know, doesn't really make sense given her background.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's and also just because like the looks they're giving her, like obviously, uh I don't know. Like again, everybody knows she's not virgin. So
Okay,
she
cool. So it was just my young innocent eyes, or I guess in this case, innocent ears, hearing things in that weren't there. Okay,
mhm.
as an adult,
It's
that's what I figured, but
mhm. Yeah.
I needed to double check with a reasonable person. Okay, so anyway, so back to our scene. Um, you know, Maxwell started to get nervous. Where's Cece? You know, um, he fancies himself, as we learn later, this guy fancies himself to be somewhat of a ladies' man. But so where's Cece? And Niles can't help but say, perhaps she melted. It's raining out. Perhaps she melted. Shall I see if there's a pointy hat and a Chanel suit lying in the street? And of course,
Mhm.
shortly thereafter, the doorbell rings and Cece comes. And Cece says that she is hot tonight. Um, and oh, I'm sorry. I totally jumped the gun. I'm sorry. There's more before Cece gets there. Um,
Mhm.
so Maxwell is explaining that, we really need this guy to pull through because otherwise we're going to lose the theater. We'll lose Ben Vereen. It could be another 20 years before the pieces come together again.
Mhm.
And Fran's like, well, what would happen to my mother's Pishke? And Maxwell says, well, surely your mother recognizes that investing in the theater is a risky business. No, no, no. That's not how Sylvia looked at this. She had heard it was a surefire hit. Sylvia is a woman who considers his idea of risk is wearing white pants to Tony Roma's. And Sylvia's already decided how she's going to spend the profit. She's going to get her whole face redone. And Max was like, "Isn't that a little premature?" And Fran's like, "Oh no, I think it's well overdue." And he's like, "No, no, to spend the profits, like, you know, theater's risky." And Fran's like, "Well, you said it was a surefire hit." And he's like, "That's my job to get investors. Believe me, I tried all the other arguments. Want to throw your money down a rat hole? The theater is dying. All of those. But oddly enough, the surefire hit was more enticing."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so which of course makes sense. Like, that's what he would do. He's trying to get people to invest in his play. He's not going to say this is theater's dying. Um, and so Fran asks him sort of the $1 million question: how much of your own dough are you investing in this? And he says that he never invests in his own plays. That would be like a doctor operating on himself, which I'm not quite sure the analogy matches fully, but okay. So anyway, I'll pause after Cece's arrival or before Cece's, because I've already sort of started talking about that. And
Go
then,
ahead.
okay. So Cece rings the doorbell and she comes in. I am hot today. Some twit of a tourist tried to cheat me out of a cab, but I stunned him with my umbrella and kneed him right in the Big Apple. And Fran says, I don't know why some nice guy hasn't snatched her up.
Mhm.
And so Maxwell says to her, Cece, I really need you to do whatever you can to make yourself presentable because, Charles Hayes fancies himself to be somewhat of a ladies' man. And Niall says, shall I open the roof and strap her to a lightning rod? Um,
Mhm.
and Cece's like go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say she literally hisses at him.
She does. Yes, she she does. And as she then is going to lock herself in the guest bathroom to get herself ready, and Fran tells her, I know 12 canasta ladies that are going to come if you don't make this work. I know 12 canasta ladies that are going to come after you like the last piece of pastrami on a tray of head cheese.
Mhm.
So I'm going to pause there. Is there anything up to that point you want to add?
I just when I was watching this, I knew this where it was going.
Okay.
I'm sure did you? Like, upon watching it the first time?
I don't remember what I thought upon watching it the
Okay.
first time. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, but I totally knew where it was going. So
Okay.
this is the setup.
So Charles Hayes then rings the doorbell and shows up and he announces, I hate show business already. And his hat is covered in water. I mean, we get a huge, he gets a huge round of applause because the actor is very famous. Um, and so he comes in, he puts his briefcase down, has taken his hat off, and Maxwell asks basically, what happened to you? And he explains, uh, so he had said, I had a harder time getting here than I did coming down the birth canal. And then he later explains, well, I was just getting into a taxi when some big blonde woman kneed me in the groin, and then she clobbered me with some hideous green umbrella. Well, guess who has a hideous green umbrella?
Mhm.
It's Cece. Um, and so Maxwell and Niles quickly hide the umbrella so he doesn't see it.
Yeah. Maxwell kind of tosses the umbrella behind him to Niles, and Niles kind of whisks it away.
Yes, very efficiently.
Yes.
I'll also say I don't think that color green is hideous. I actually rather like that color green, but that's just me. Um, so Charles Hayes starts asking, "Where's your partner, Cece? She's the best fax I ever had." And Maxwell tries to propose, like, why don't we keep this between us boys? And he's told no, that I gave that up in camp, Sheffy, or something like that. And then he says, "Let me tell you why I'm getting into showbiz. I have made zillions in waste management, but you just don't see a lot of leg. And if you do, you're calling homicide." And so Max was like, "Well, what are you saying?" He says, "No chick, no check, no deal." Well, I think that's a good place to pause. Do you want to add
Hmm.
anything?
Well, again, this is what I knew it was going to be Charles Hayes that Cece clobbered.
Yeah.
That's classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So, you know, uh, around that time, Cece opens the bathroom door and starts calling Maxwell, is he here? And Niall shoves her back into the bathroom, closes the door.
Yes. It's a shove.
It, I mean, it is starting something that we see throughout this episode of um, physical humor with Cece and um, people generally not being too nice to her.
Hmm.
Although she sort of deserves it. It kind of,
Eh.
kind of like maybe don't clobber people with your
Yeah.
umbrella and knee them in the groin. Maybe.
Yeah. To catch a cab.
Yeah, maybe that's a poor choice. Just saying. Um. So anyway, so of course Charles Hayes hears that. Well, what was that? And Maxwell basically is like resigned to give up. And Maxwell thinks that Cece's going to come out, and he's like, "Oh, well, you should know that was my partner, Miss Babcock." And he's like, "All right, come on in, Miss Babcock." And instead of Cece in her, um, shall we say, frumpy attire, we see a black stockinged leg come out from behind the wall and sort of wave and wiggle a little. Right?
Hmm.
Is there a
Yep.
better way to describe that?
It's kind of like the classic enticing, like
It's flirty.
flirtatious. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and it's Fran's leg, obviously. "Oh no, do I have a run in my Hanes?" She starts, and he says, "No, that's not a run. That's just a little snag. If you have some clear polish, I'll fix it for you." And so she introduces herself as Miss Babcock before Maxwell can properly identify her. Um, and we hear Cece basically pounding on the door,
Hmm.
because she's locked in the bathroom still. And Haste is like, "What's that?" And Fran's like, "Oh, the dog. We put her away because we didn't want her to jump your leg." And Niles is like, "We really need to have her fixed."
Hmm. And
Yeah.
that's the beginning.
Yes.
I didn't really have anything to add, so do you mind if I take
I would
us
love
to
it
the
if you would take
beginning?
us. Go ahead.
So that comment about, oh, that's the dog, is the start of a long running joke because we are now in the office and Niles, Cece, Maxwell, and Fran are all gathered in there, filling in, um, obviously trying to figure out what to do now.
Right.
And Cece's offended that Fran would ever try to pretend to be her because she's not in my class or my breeding. And of course, Niles is like, well, then she won't lick herself in company. Um, and Cece, it's like, Max, are you going to let him talk to me like this? And he's like, yeah, basically,
Exactly.
because she's the one who got them kind of in this pickle by hitting him over the head and kneeing him in the groin.
Correct.
Um, so then, there's also talk about whether they need, he even says bad CC, very bad. And I think it's Fran who talks about maybe needing a rolled up newspaper
It
for
is.
her.
Yes. What's he going
But
to do? Hit her with the rolled up newspaper?
yeah. So they're quickly trying to fill Fran in on the show and show business because she's going to continue to act like Cece. And so Maxwell starts by saying, we open in Philly. And of course, or Philadelphia. And of course, Fran gets immediately distracted. Oh, I have Aunt Selma. She has a miracle ear. If you look in, there's the Virgin Mary. She can't even get her ears pierced because they keep healing.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting because I would assume that her aunt would be Jewish.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, so as they're trying to get back on track, talking about, Fran mentions, oh, you should call me Cece, not Miss Babcock, because of course there's that classic moment where Maxwell says Miss Babcock, and they both turn and respond.
Hmm.
And again, she's like, you've been partners for over 10 years. You would think there's a certain level of intimacy. And of course, Cece's like, yeah, I would think so too.
She says, I've always said that. And she
Yes,
like leans in and has this like smile on her face because we all know that's what she wants, a certain level of
exactly.
intimacy with Maxwell.
Yes. But there's a knock on the door. Like Charles is still there at the house and is wondering what is going on. So they quickly shove Cece out onto the back porch, which it's raining very hard.
Yeah.
Like
It's
it's pouring.
pouring.
It's pouring. And the three of them kind of quickly turn their backs to it
Hmm.
to cover up, because it's glass, doors. And Charles is asking, like, what are you guys doing? Oh, we had to put the dog out.
Right.
Um, and what did I have here? Does she ever wear
Yes. Okay. So,
okay.
Charlie says to Maxwell, I've got a couple of questions for you first. And he gets distracted
Oh, yes.
with, go ahead.
Oh, well, does she ever wear, isn't it?
So to Fran, who he thinks is Cece, first, does she ever wear pants?
Yes.
Because if so, I'm out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have no idea what word I wrote. Having a little difficulty deciphering my own
No,
handwriting.
it's
So
fine.
thank
But
you for
I knew you were gonna. I was like, I wanted to be like, is the word
that. Mhm.
pants? Does it have something to do with pants?
Yes, pants. um, but anyway, then he starts talking about the show. Act one, trash. There's flies on it. And of course, anytime he talks about it, it's somehow connected to garbage.
Correct.
Um, and you know, he's like, you really need like a more of a I
A
don't know the
Rock'em
exact word, but
Sock'em opening number.
yes. And Fran kind of actually agrees with him. She's like, people go to the show after dinner. They've got gas. They need some cover.
Correct.
And he's like, Charles is saying, well, and they need some noise to, so they could open their candy wrappers.
More
And
garbage.
yeah, more garbage. And intermission is a big thing, and it's like how booked Massachusetts is in the fall or something like that.
It's going to sound like Massachusetts in the fall. He's talking about all the leaves down and the crinkling and crunching
Ah,
and all of the
gotcha. Okay,
garbage.
that makes a lot more sense. Um, but again, so Fran was kind of, backing him up there.
Hmm.
And he's obviously into her and says, you know what? I'll bring a check over, not to Maxwell, to Cece,
Who's
quote unquote
actually Fran.
Cece. Yes, who is actually Fran. And he asks if she will go with him to the Rainbow Room tomorrow night. And like kind of like I feel like Maxwell's trying to like be like, no, 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 but she's not paying attention. She's agreeing. And of course, she loves the Rainbow Room, and Charles's comment is, oh, they have 20 to 30 dumpsters a night. That's how
Yeah.
you know it's like they're doing good business.
Yeah, he calls him something like a true success story or something like
Yeah.
that.
But then he's wanting to know where CC Fran lives. And of course, Fran does not know. And so Niles kind of prodding, maybe you have a business card in your purse. And
Right.
then of course she immediately goes to her own purse And he's like, "Oh no, not that purse, your purse, and that's my purse." Niles is
Correct.
cover for him. And of course, there's like kind of a look between Niles and Charles, and Niles explains it's all the rage in Europe.
Right.
So Cece or Fran starts going through Cece's purse.
Did you catch what she
Retinol,
had in there?
collagen, yeah, retinol, collagen, shrink the. Oh, I'm really not happy. Um, and so anyway, finally, I believe Maxwell just like says the address,
Correct.
and they exit. And I'm going to just go a little bit more because
Oh,
they kind of go out into the hallway, but then immediately back in.
mhm.
They go out into the hallway. Maxwell turns to Niles and says, "Niles, did you forget something?" And so Niles is like, "Oh, yes." And he goes back into the office. And in the background at the glass doors, you see Cece in the pouring rain trying to get in. But all Niles does is turn off the lamp, like the little desk light, and then leaves. And Cece's just at the window, like in the rain, wanting to come in.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add?
So just a few things. So before they push Cece out into the rain, Maxwell has basically resigned himself to this terrible plan. And he says, "All right, we have exactly 3 minutes to teach you everything Miss Babcock knows about the theater." And Niles says, "We can do that and make a 2-minute egg." So that's the point at which Maxwell says, "We open in Philadelphia." And so after Charles has come in and asked, first off, does she ever wear pants? His second question is, where do we open? And Fran excitedly says, "Oh, I know that. I know that."
Oh, yes.
Uh, and then because she knows she was told it, but she couldn't remember. And so Niles tries to help and says, "Miss Babcock, would you like some cream cheese?" And Fran says, "We open in Kraft." And
Mhm.
and Maxwell says, That's Philly, Miss Fine, Miss Babcock, fine Miss Babcock." And he like puts his arm around her, sort of like, you know, "It's okay, you're fine, Miss Babcock." And um, and Charlie says, "That she is." And that's when he starts talking about how we need a Rock'em Sock'em opening number.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay. Take us to the living room, Debbie.
So, in another very short moment of seeing the kids, we see Brighton and Maggie are playing cards, and Brighton has apparently told her that 3 kings beat 4 queens. And for some odd reason, Maggie doesn't quite believe him. And Fran says to Brighton, "Didn't I tell you not to lie?" And he says, "Gee, I don't know, Cece, did you?" And she's like, "I'm not lying. I'm just pretending, like in one of your father's plays." And she then, points out to Brighton, like, why aren't you playing hide and seek with your sister Gracie? She's been in that hamper for 3.5 hours. And Brighton callously says, "Oh, she'll show. How many days can she go without food?" Which is really a jerky thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, and Fran responds, "About as long as you can go without that Playboy magazine that's rolled up in your Lincoln Logs." And he says, "All right, Gracie, ready or not, here I come." Like as if he's finally going to go find her. So Fran, meanwhile, is walking through the first floor and she's about to leave. And she says to Niles, "Okay, Niles, I'm off to be Miss Babcock. Help me get into character. Hit me with your best shot." And he says, "Oh no, Miss Fine, I couldn't possibly." And she says, "Oh, come on. Hello, hello, I'm Cece Babcock, off to go to work." And he says, "Your usual corner." And then he's like, "Ugh, I'm sorry, Miss Fine. Don't make me do this." And she continues, "I'm Miss Babcock. I'm off to get money from a man." And he says, "Don't forget your change belt." "Oh, I hate myself." "Do it again." And she says, "No, I have to go." And he's like, "Come on, just one more. I'm hot." And she says, "Oh, all right. I'll make it easy. Niles, get me a drink. I'm dog tired." And he's like, "Dog tired? Drink for a dog." And she's like, "I can't hear anything." And so he continues mumbling to himself. And she says, "Oh, Niles, get a life." And so she leaves. And as soon as she leaves, Niles is like, "I've got it. I've got it." And he opens the door and shouts, "I'll leave the lid up on the toilet bowl, officer." Because clearly he shouted at the wrong person.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that? That I think is actually
Nope.
the shortest scene in this entire episode. So
Yes. I don't have anything to add, and we're about to go into the longest scene, so you and I will just have to kind of figure out what we want to best the reins. But
I think good breaks are when someone shows up,
that sounds good to me.
and then, I mean, there's some flipping back and forth between like the main room and where other people are ensconced.
Mhm.
But that's not a good breaking point because we hear anyway.
Yeah. So
We'll do our best.
we'll do our best. So
Okay.
we are now at Cece's apartment, which we have
Hmm.
never seen before.
Correct.
And it's apparently the first time, obviously, that Fran's been there. And so she says, "Oh, very warm." And of course, it's like a very 90s modern kind of apartment. So, like grays, blacks,
White.
straight lines. Yeah. And you know how Fran is all about color. So,
Correct.
very different.
Yeah.
And so, again, Cece has to make a comment about Fran's outfit. Um,
Hmm.
oh, is that from the Fleiss collection? And she's like, "Well, you said to wear designer."
Right.
Um, so uh, let's see. So she takes Fran to the couch. They sit down. Cece has prepared a little dossier on herself, and she says short, but it's
Correct.
actually a very thick, very
Yeah.
thick. She's like flipping through like to the different segments, like, oh, this is when I was born, this is childhood, this is when I came out, this is where, and of course Fran stops her there and says, "Oh, you came out, like, why are you sniffing around Mr. Sheffield then?"
Right.
And he says, like, "No, as in I had a coming out party." And uh of course Fran's still like, "Oh, well, don't worry, you and your special friend can
Can now
hug
dance together at
at
Disneyland.
Disneyland." Yeah. So again, Fran starts looking around the apartment. Behind the couch is a little table that has some like pictures. And she's like, "Oh, who are these?" Oh, it's her brother and sister.
Right.
"Oh, who's this like good looking guy?" "Oh, no one, oh, come on, Miss like, tell me." And she finally breaks down. It's like it came with the frame. And she sits down and she's like, "I know, how pathetic that looks." And she's like, "Oh, no, no." But in behind Cece, who's sitting on the couch, Fran mouths, "So pathetic."
Right. I actually think she says it because you can hear it. She just says it quietly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a very exaggerated, like her mouth is very exaggerated,
Yes.
but it's like, again, we can kind of hear it, but
Cece can't.
you assume Cece can't. So then again, trying to go through where stuff is so she knows when he arrives, like, "Oh, what can I offer for him to drink?" "Oh, I've got gin, vodka, bourbon. Do you have anything?" Does she say lighter or
Softer.
softer? And Cece's kind of showing she has a little bar area, and apparently not,
She has
because
rum.
yeah, but Fran's like, "Well, it's a good thing I always bring around with me a can of I don't know."
Clamato.
Oh, she just said tomato because it's not necessarily
Clamato.
clamato. Okay.
Clamato, which, as someone who grew up in a kosher home, that sounds disgusting. That's just me.
Okay.
Continue.
um,
I'm sorry.
nope, that's okay. And there's a reference to Martha Stewart, and well, it turns out that the amount that they're expecting in terms of an investment from Charles is $500,000.
Yep.
Um, and we hear doorbell. Oh, who could like obviously it's going to be Charles. So Cece runs into the front closet right near the door.
Right.
And I will hand the reins over to you. Unless you want to add something to this first part.
Um, I guess I just want to circle back on the he came with the frame discussion.
Mhm.
You know, what Fran says to her is, "Oh, honey, there's nothing to be ashamed of." A lot of grown women do that. That's what she says audibly to Cece, and then she does say the so pathetic thing.
Yeah.
Um, so are you sure you want me to take over? I'm happy to have you keep doing the scene and just chime in.
Okay. I'll go for it. You can chime in at
Okay.
will. Okay.
Thank you.
So Fran opens the door, and of course she's acting as Cece, and there's Charles, and he has a bouquet of flowers for her.
A very nice bouquet of
Yes,
flowers.
it's a large bouquet. And uh, you know, he kind of notes, oh, is this your apartment? It doesn't really like look like you. And she's like, oh, and she had taken his coat, and so she's trying to like keep him from looking into the closet. So she shoves it into where Cece is.
She like tosses it.
Yeah, and she's like, "Oh, go hire a street decorator." Um, but it turns out that again, Charles is so taken with Francisi that he has decided to double his investment, which would mean $1 million.
Yes, it
And you
would.
kind of hear, how would you describe it? A
She
moan,
moans.
a moan, like a pleased,
Yes, a very
a moan of
pleasurable
pleasure.
moan.
Yes, from the closet. And so Fran explains that way. Oh, poltergeist. I got this apartment really cheap, but I can't watch TV. Um,
Correct.
so then, I think they're trying to find their way to the kitchen. Fran leads them to a linen closet and she's like, "Oh, I had the maid over today. She never puts back anything where you expect it to be." Um,
Correct. Which he accepts.
mhm.
Which he just
Yeah.
accepts as a logical
Yep.
explanation, even though a kitchen has plumbing and things that
Yep.
don't
He
easily move. Continue.
goes along with it. And so Fran then decides, oh, well, it makes sense if, kind of near the bar area, if she continues that way. That's probably where
Hmm.
the kitchen is. So as they're walking around the bar to go towards the kitchen, there's a doorbell. And Charles is like, well, aren't you going to go answer that? And she's like, oh, it's just my idiot neighbor. You live in 6B. And
Exactly.
she continues to take Charles into the kitchen, which is not visible like to us as the audience anymore.
Correct.
And again, don't know if you want to take over or not.
Well, so I guess I just want to say one thing, and then I can take over if you want, or you can keep going. It's up to you. But I do want to say it's so interesting to me that, when Fran first got to Cece's apartment, Cece kind of makes a comment about, "You finally got here," like, and then she gives this short dossier on herself. But it doesn't occur to her, or really to Fran, to like get a tour of the apartment.
Yeah, that would have been
Like,
helpful.
right? Like, I guess if he'd wanted a drink, that would have been like, I guess she knew where the bar was, and I frankly didn't notice if there were glasses there. But like, what if he needed a napkin, a tissue? What if he needed to use the bathroom? Like, I mean, Fran had already noted that to Cece, and I don't think we mentioned this, but like she says, for $500,000, like, couldn't you put a little cheese on a Ritz, like a little snack for him, something like, be a little bit more hospitable. Um, but yeah, it doesn't occur to them that maybe she should know where things are in the apartment.
Mhm. Okay, so I'll do just a little bit of who shows up and then pass it back over when Fran and Charles reappear. Is that
Okay,
okay?
sure.
So Cece, meanwhile, rushes out of the closet, opens the door, and there's Maxwell. And
Correct.
Maxwell has showed up because he's decided he's not going to put up with this ruse anymore. Um, and but Cece's like, no, no, like he's up, like she got him to, get more. Like she didn't have to put out to get, she didn't even have to put out, and he's up to 1 million, and that changes his mind, and they both rush into the closet as they
Right.
hear the approaching
So
voice.
the exchange you were referencing, Maxwell comes in and says, "Cece, I've come to my senses. This is not how I do business." And she's like, are you crazy? He's throwing money at her. And she didn't even have to put out. And Maxwell looks at her and she's like, she quickly adds hors d'oeuvres, the cat, anything really. And he says,
Mhm.
I don't care how important this play is to me. Nothing is worth this. And Cece says, he's up to $1 million. And that's when Maxwell says, they're coming, get in the closet. Because $1 million has changed his mind. That's enough to convince him. So they're coming out of the kitchen and Fran, pretending to be Cece, says to him, I wouldn't eat that shrimp if I were you. God knows how long it's been in there. And he says, Cece, I'm an expert on garbage. This shrimp's got 2-3 hours before it turns. You want some? And he offers it to her and she says, well, as appealing as hepatitis sounds, yellow is just not my color. And
Mhm.
so, they approach the couch and he eats the shrimp, despite the fact that it has 2 or 3 hours before it turns. And so he says something like, I want to talk about us. And he says, I think you and I see eye to eye. And she lifts his chin saying, those aren't my eyes. And they sit
Mhm.
down on the she sits on the couch and he sits on the couch. And he says, did you know that little bald middle-aged men have very high levels of testosterone? And she says, kind of again, sort of like how she said, so pathetic, like an ironic twist of fate. And so he starts saying, let's dump Sheffield and make this a duet. You said on the phone that you're the brains and he's just a pretty face in a blazer. And Fran gets really incensed. I said that? How dare me? And so then
Mhm.
the camera cuts to Maxwell and Cece in the closet, and Cece tries to defend herself, saying, I said you were pretty great and a trailblazer, damn cellular phones.
Mhm. Yeah, that was one of the things I was wanting to talk to you about because in the synopsis, um, you made it seem like do you believe Cece said what Charles says or what Cece says to Maxwell in the closet?
Oh, I'm frankly torn.
Mhm.
On the one hand, it's clear that Cece's in love with Maxwell, right? So it seems unlikely that she would, throw him under the bus like that. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, like she's clearly trying to get the money and she knows this guy is a bit of a ladies man, so flirting with him is probably a good plan in her mind. um
Yeah. Mhm.
and then there's also like they have been partners for over 10 years. Not to go too far into future fun, but like she late at a later point does want to be a full partner and she wants like her own she wants more of a bigger role in the business and he denies it to her. So like, it's there probably is a little bit of resentment on her part. So I really don't know.
Okay.
Um,
I was
what
just
did you
curious.
think?
I mean, again, just because of how much like Cece like I don't know if it's love, but wants to be with him. That's where I also thought like she probably did say pretty great in a trailblazer. But again, it could be the opposite. So
Correct.
it's not clear one way or the other.
Correct. Um, no, I mean that's it's interesting, and I think you're right that I don't think she's in love with him. She's definitely in lust with him.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah. Um, so Charlie asks Fran, who's still pretending to be Cece, what does Sheffield really have that I don't have? And she says, well, for starters, he doesn't have a shrimp vein hanging out of his tooth. And then she adds, Mr. Sheffield is a man of integrity. When he believes in a play, he will stick by it, even if it takes him 20 years to mount, whilst I, Cece Babcock, will mount just about anything. And, we then cut back to Maxwell and Cece in the closet, and Cece's feeling on top of the shelf saying, there must be a gun here somewhere. I'll say she was a burglar, you know? Um, and um, anyway, so, you know, Maxwell eventually comes out of the closet holding Charlie's coat, and Fran's like, Mr. Sheffield, what are you doing here? It actually, she says it something like, she goes in, he comes out. It's like a David Copperfield special.
Hmm.
What are you doing here? And he says that he's just throwing out the trash, and he's like opened the door and has basically walked Charlie out and tosses his coat at him. And then Cece can't just let things be. Charlie, do you want to hear a pretty funny story? And she like chases after him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good place. Do you want to add anything?
So then, like, kind of to wrap it up, like, just the scene. So after Cece runs off, you know, Fran and Maxwell are talking like, "Oh, like you were so worried you were looking through the keyhole and stuff." And then Fran has a moment like, "Oh, you don't do that at home, do you?" um, but yeah, that's
And then
so.
he has a look on his face,
Mhm. Yeah.
which was also sort of hard to read, I thought.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Um, did you have anything else for that
No.
scene? So we have kind of a longer credit scene.
Yeah,
We're in the kitchen. Uh, Niles and Fran are there. Um, Apparently Sylvia's coming over. And like, how am I gonna tell her that she doesn't have a pot to pish can?
correct.
um, and she's scared basically to tell her mother. And so
What was
she goes,
Niall's suggestion?
go ahead.
Just tell her the truth. And she's like,
Ah,
"Oh, right, the truth. Of course. I'm a grown woman. I don't have to be afraid of my own mother."
mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple other things she says, but we don't need to go into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You know what
I know what you're gonna say. So, and anyone who's listened to
basically commenting on, you know, she slowed down. Because of,
since her
yes.
thighs met.
Yes. Um, but the side door, so the door that they have in the kitchen, there's a knock, she opens it, Sylvia. And she greets her, and then she's like, honestly, I'm like afraid to tell you something. How could my own daughter be afraid of me? All that stuff. But Fran's like makes her way to the other side of the kitchen again.
Hmm.
Um, and Niles is right there. And okay, do you recall who said "Be afraid, be very afraid"?
That was
Was that
Niles.
Sylvia? Oh, that was
No,
Niles.
so so Fran says, "I'm scared you're gonna yell," and Sylvia says, "Darling, you're scared of your mother? I could just smack you." And
Yeah,
that's when Niall says, "Be
says
afraid,
"Be
be
afraid, be
very
very."
afraid."
And
And
that
then,
draws Sylvia's attention.
bingo,
And, she's like, well, why don't you call your mother, who lives in a drafty country eating French fries from a newspaper? Like, is that how she, like,
yeah,
what was that
Sylvia says,
about?
"Meanwhile," when she like turns her focus on him. "Meanwhile, when's the last time you called your poor mother? An ocean
Mhm.
away in a drafty country eating French fries from a newspaper?" Like, it's the motherly Jewish guilt. Like,
Yeah. But I'm talking about like is she just the whole concept of fish and chips? Is that why she's saying French fries from a newspaper?
I assume so, yes.
Okay. And again, I'm afraid you're going to yell. Why would I yell?
Where was Fran when she said that
It was like behind their like by the refrigerator.
exactly, it's like she's hiding behind the
Yeah.
door of the refrigerator.
Yes. Um, but in the meantime, Maxwell comes in and he's like, "Oh, I have some good news. I found a new investor who shares my vision and integrity." And so everybody's happy, including Sylvia, because obviously her money's on the line. And then he's like, "And let me tell you about your daughter." And Fran's like, "No, no, you don't need to tell her, anything." But he basically tells her, "Yeah, she turned down one of the wealthiest men, because in defense of me or whatever."
Out of
And
loyalty
so,
to me.
yeah, and Sophia, like, very calmly is just like, "Oh, Fran, like, you don't know me," or something like that. And then she walks over because Niles is kind of back near the stove area cooking, and she motions down towards the oven and says, "Is this gas? Excuse me." Um, And she opens it and puts her like upper body into it.
Correct.
Very dramatic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
No, no,
Okay.
I'm good.
So that's that. Yeah, I think overall it was interesting because I feel like we had fewer scenes overall. Like they tended to be longer
We
than
did.
so to some extent when I was watching it, it seemed to go by quickly. Um in some ways, but also as I'm taking notes and I notice that my notes take up more pages than normal per scene, I'm like, "Oh, this is different."
Yeah, so I'm not gonna claim to do any sort of statistical analysis for the to average the number of scenes per episode, but usually we have, I think, about double the number of scenes of this
Mhm.
episode. 'Cause here, I
Yeah.
think we had 6. Normally, we have 12 or more, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. And again, like most of this episode takes place in the living room and Cece's living room with just the occasional scenes in the office and the kitchen.
Correct. Is there
Yep.
anything you wanna talk about overall before we jump into our shticks?
Um, no, I think let's unless you have something, I think let's jump into our shticks.
Alright, where would you like to start?
Um, let's just start from the top. Favorite fashion.
Okay.
Um, I would be curious. So you said, again, you like the color green of
Cece's
Cece's
umbrella, yes.
umbrella, and it seems to me that later on in the kitchen scene at the end, both Fran and Sylvia are wearing very bright clothes that kind
They
of,
are.
and I feel like there's green. I don't know how close. I didn't compare it that well, um, but I just thought it was funny, like that they're wearing a similar, at least green at the end. Um,
Yeah, so, what Fran's wearing in the last scene, she has a pink, like a fuchsia hot pink skirt, and then she's wearing like a horizontal striped sweater with pink and neon green, and I wanna say yellow. I don't remember what the 3rd color is, but I think it's yellow.
Mhm.
Um, I like that outfit.
Yeah, I knew you would. Like
I know.
that seems an outfit you would like. Again, I'm not as into that kind of bright colors, but yeah, it's what what she was wearing to the actual like as she's pretending to be Cece in Cece's apartment uh looked nice.
So,
Um
you wanna describe it for those who haven't watched the episode recently?
I didn't take detailed notes, but it's like she's wearing stockings, right?
Mhm,
Black, and she has kind of a form fitting, not super short, but shorter dress.
mhm.
Um, was it
It's like a brown and black.
okay? Yeah, because it's a darker
It's
color.
it's a bit more
I could,
sedate for her.
yeah, but it's still like way more than what Cece would wear.
Oh, yeah, as a counterpoint, do you remember what Cece's wearing in that scene?
Ooh,
So, the dress that Fran is wearing, because I don't think we said this, yes, it's a shorter dress, but it has, like, tank top-like sleeves. It has a I'm not sure if I would call it a total scoop neck, but it's decently low cut because you can see the top of her cleavage, right?
hmm,
And, I mean, her we all know what her hair looks like, but her arms are bare, her chest is bare.
yeah.
Um, Cece, on the other hand, is wearing
Wearing
a
turtleneck.
it's not exactly a turtleneck, but it's a long sleeved, either navy or black dress with red cuffs, like thick red cuffs, and then a red collar. And it sort of looks like a double breasted, like if you had a double breasted jacket, I think it would have the 2 lines of buttons down the front, right?
Hmm.
That's what the dress has. It has these like metallic looking buttons or decorations, unclear, going down the front of the dress, or at least the first half of it. And instead of Fran's dress, sort of gives the hourglass figure, the ideal
Mhm.
body shape, what people are told is what society tells us is an ideal body shape. Cece's
Mhm.
is more straight down. Like
Yeah.
her waist is sort of swallowed up. Again, long sleeves. She's also wearing stockings or tights. Um, it's a much more severe look.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, just classic contrast between the two.
mhm.
Did you have a favorite outfit, or was it that outfit at the end?
I think it actually is the outfit Fran is wearing at the very beginning. She's wearing a hot pink long sleeve button down shirt under a black and pink patterned um, tank type dress.
Mhm.
That I think is my favorite. Plus, then she has, I think, um, thigh high black boots. That is my favorite outfit of hers in this episode.
Okay. No bathrobes this episode.
We didn't have breakfast.
Yeah.
I do think the outfit Fran is wearing when she first identifies herself as Miss Babcock is worth noting.
Mhm.
It's a white suit with blue trim. Um, and then she has, I think, a blue turtleneck under it. Um, and I like it. I also think it's reflective of the weather, because it's been pouring and raining out, and yet, it has light blue and then darker blue on the outfit. So it just made me think of rain and clouds.
Hmm.
So I thought that
Huh.
was worth mentioning. I take it you didn't particularly like anything anyone wore.
Uh, like I said, I like her outfit to when she went on that. Would you call it a date? A business meeting date? Weird thing.
Well, it, dinner, I guess dinner. Um,
Yes.
it sort of actually, I guess I should mention this. It sort of seems like you're right. It's unclear if it's a date or if it's a business dinner. But when Charles first says that he brings up dinner, he doesn't even really ask her. He just says, "I'm going to give you the check over dinner tomorrow," and I made reservations at the Rainbow Room.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to
Yeah.
mention that.
Yeah.
Not great.
Okay. Any other fashion you want to discuss?
I don't think so. Do you have any others?
No. So notable New Yorkers?
There were a good number in this
Yeah.
episode.
Mhm.
Would you like me to start?
Sure. Go for it.
So Marvin Hamlish, who I think we might have talked about previously, but I'm not sure, just in case we haven't. He was an American composer and conductor. He won a Tony, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Pulitzer prizes. He apparently died in 2012. Um, there's a reference to Liz Taylor, who I know we've spoken about before.
Mhm.
Obviously, Ben Vereen.
Mhm.
For those who do not know, he is an American actor, singer, and dancer who is known for Broadway productions of Pippin and Jesus Christ Superstar. And also, as Fran mentioned, he was in Roots, which was a 1977 American miniseries whose finale apparently was the third highest rated episode for any TV series and is the second most watched series finale in US television history.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that until oh, all of this is according to our friends at Wikipedia. I should mention that. Um, Pippin was a 1972 musical premised on a mysterious performance troupe that tells the story of a young prince named Pippin who is searching for meaning and significance. That's according to Wikipedia. My knowledge of it comes from the song Magic to Do. Um, Fran references the show 10 Speed and Brown Shoe, which was a short lived American detective comedy show, also from our friends at Wikipedia. Should I let you jump in so I can catch my breath?
Sure. So we have yet again. There's another Wizard of Oz. Actually, a couple of Wizard of Oz references when they talk about Cece riding in a basket with Toto, um, and then also with her melting, with the rain.
Right?
Uh, yeah. I was just kind of, it was interesting that back to back scenes had that particular reference.
Hmm.
And you already mentioned, I'm assuming this is, I didn't look into it, but whenever they're talking about, first of all, sorry, let me back up. The title of this episode, Pishke Business, makes me think of risky business. Um, and of course, risky business makes me think of the movie Risky Business. But what I was talking about when they're talking about Sylvia and her sense of risk is to wear white pants to
Hmm.
Tony Roma's? Is that
Tony Roma's is a steakhouse restaurant.
okay? Okay. I figured it was some type of restaurant. Um, they mentioned Pee Wee, as in I'm assuming Pee Wee Herman.
I don't
Um,
remember that, but I assume
yeah,
you're right.
yeah. When they're talking about like when Cece comes in and she's so proud of herself, um, or right before then, that's around that time before she talks about kneeing the guy in the Big Apple.
Hmm.
They mentioned Pee Wee.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay.
I didn't know if this was a vague reference to like Frankenstein, the whole strapping her to a table and putting her up for the lightning rod. Did you think that was a Frankenstein reference?
Now I do. I
Okay.
mean, I knew it had something, not necessarily Frankenstein the novel, but
Hmm.
more as in Frankenstein in pop culture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I believe that. I knew it
Okay.
was some reference to, you know, she needed a significant amount of work. I think I probably would have thought watching this as a much younger person, I probably would have thought there's an episode of Dexter's Laboratory where I think
Ah.
I, which must, as you point out, be premised on some version of Frankenstein. I think
Hmm.
they use lightning as an animator. So,
Yeah. Yeah. The Virgin Mary that
yep,
shows up in Aunt Selma's Miracle Year. And let's see here. Do you want to add some more as I'm looking through?
sure. The big one is Wallace Shawn, who
Oh,
plays
yes.
Charles Haste. He's an American actor and playwright. To me and Bernadette at least, he is known for his role in The Princess Bride.
Yes.
Um,
Inconceivable.
exactly. Um, there's also obviously reference to the Rainbow Room, which I feel like has come up before, but
Maybe.
just in case it hasn't, according to its own website, the Rainbow Room is the original home of New York glamour and entertainment, where the food, the service, and the skyline all come together to create incomparable, unforgettable experiences. End quote.
Hmm.
Um, Steven Seagal
Yep.
is a reference. He's an American actor, producer, screenwriter, martial artist, and musician known for Above the Law. Um, Heidi Fleiss. Did you know who
Hmm.
that was?
The name was familiar, but I couldn't tell you specifics.
So, according again to our friends at Wikipedia, Heidi Fleiss, she ran an upscale prostitution ring in Los Angeles. She was
Ah,
known as the Hollywood Madam, and apparently in the 1990s, she was also a television personality and columnist.
hmm. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't know who she was before.
yeah.
If she's
Um,
listening, I'm sorry.
um, so I mentioned before Martha Stewart was
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, Ed McMahon,
Mm-hmm.
Poltergeist. Um, Now I know Fran kind of said it in general, but also how she says now I can't watch TV. I think she's then also referencing the movie Poltergeist, in terms of what
Ah,
happened there. Yep.
David Copperfield, who,
Yes.
according to his webpage, is the first living illusionist to be honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he's again according to his website, the greatest magician in the world.
Oh yes. And then again, back to some references we've heard often: cats and Fiddler on the Roof. Because as Fran is explaining to Charles that Mr. Sheffield's a man of vision, even though he passed on cats. When they asked where to put that fiddler, he put him on the roof.
Right. Right. Um, yeah, so the cats thing is clearly a running joke.
Uh-huh.
Um, we'll also
And
hear more about Maxwell's production of Fiddler on the Roof at a later point.
mm.
Um,
And
yeah.
then be afraid, be very afraid was the tagline from the movie The Fly, which was a 1986 film.
I'm so glad we're doing this together because I did not pick up on that. I just
Mm.
knew that was
Like
something people said.
I've heard it before, be afraid, be very afraid. So I had to Google though where that came from. But yeah. Anything else that you had?
I think that's it.
Okay. So we
So
have a bit more to talk about in Yiddish Cop this week.
we do. So I'm going to start with the easy one. Clams are not kosher, which you knew I was going to say. Um,
Hmm.
but then the big one is pishki, which is, as you pointed out, in the title. What's interesting to me is I can't find a specific reference to tying pishki to playing cards. Um, but instead, my understanding of pishki and what I was also seeing when I did some online searching to see if my understanding was, you know, correct, is the pishki usually is, refers to money to be donated to charity.
Huh.
Pishki, it comes from, I think it was the Russian for small box, because it's usually like a tin can or something small that people put like change and things into, and then ultimately it's supposed to be donated to charity. So I'm not. I mean, maybe it's an indication that they were playing for such small amounts of money. Like I know my grandmother used to play cards. I think it was 10 cents a hand or something like that. Um, but otherwise, I'm sort of at a loss.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I just took it at face value that like that would mean winnings
Which
from a
I
card game. So
I mean, I guess that makes sense. I mean, maybe you're right that they picked this Yiddish word because of how similar it sounds to risky business, like pishki
hmm.
business, risky business. Also, I've seen multiple spellings of it. Pishki, like ending it like with the e, is clearly a Yiddish thing instead of a Hebrew. Otherwise, it would be pishka, like there'd be an a h sound instead of e. Um, but yeah, I've seen it spelled with an I or with a U. So
Hmm.
yeah. Shall we jump to 90s nostalgia?
Wait, there's
Oh,
more.
oh no. Oh no. What did I miss? Oh no.
Well, unless I'm totally wrong. Is
You're
this not
probably
this
right.
might nope, this well the Canasta group.
Oh, Canasta?
Canasta.
It's a card game.
Oh, then never mind.
Oh, thank goodness.
I was like, surely I've never heard of it.
I
Um,
mean, it's a card game played by, I mean, my grandmother played Canasta, but I don't know if there's actually a
well,
Jewish
because
Canasta.
well, and the reason you know why I connected it was because they were all referring it to the Pishki. So sorry, my
No,
bad.
that's fine. So according to some some quick uh some quick Googling on my part, according to jewishboca.org, and I quote, the word canasta actually means basket in the Spanish language, a reference to a tray that was used to hold cards. But and then they point out how it's a game that's bringing Jewish women together. Um,
Mhm.
so they reference canasta and mahjong. Um, and apparently there's actually so again, according to Jewish Boca, Canasta can be considered a classic card game, although it's actually younger in game history than other popular card games. The game appeared in the 1940s in the country of Uruguay and eventually spread throughout Latin America, only to be adopted in the United States, where it became a card game that can only be described as one of the most popular ever. The first standard and
Interesting.
official rules appeared thanks to the Manhattan Regency Club, and the game received the name of Classic Canasta. Today, the popularity of canasta is still as high as it was in the past. The word canasta actually means basket in the Spanish language, a reference to a tray that was used to hold cards. And then there's a reference to both of these games, so canasta and mahjong, are still bringing Jewish women of all ages and backgrounds together. All of that was
Okay.
quoted from jewishboca.org.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. Sorry, I had never heard of that.
Oh, you're
Like,
very welcome. But I was definitely like, oh no, what did I miss? What did I miss? Um, yeah, that's actually really interesting. I didn't know the history of canasta. So
Mhm. Okay.
now can we jump to 90s nostalgia, or is there something else that I missed?
Nope. We can go to 90s nostalgia.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you. Would you like to start?
The cameras.
Yes. When I was putting my notes together for this show, I was like, how do I describe the camera? So I ended up putting in my notes Sylvia's old-fashioned camera because I didn't know how else to describe it. It's like, as you put it, it's a camera with film,
Mhm.
not a cell
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah. Do we want to alternate?
Sure. Brighton's Game Boy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Um, the fax. She's the best fax I've ever had.
Oh,
Now
that's
I will
good.
say I have used the fax for work. But otherwise, pretty sure not many people do
I think
anymore.
that's right. Um, so I'm gonna throw it out. Old cars. In this episode,
Yeah.
we saw old taxis.
Hmm. And then Cece made the comment about, um, whenever there was the debate on what she actually told Charles about Maxwell, she makes that comment about cell phone reception.
Yeah,
Now, you can still have poor cell phone reception these days. But still, I imagine her cell phone looked very different from our smartphones.
I would say so. And also, she said, "Damn cellular phones." I don't think people
Hmm.
refer to their phones as cellular phones anymore. Now we just say
Nope.
cell phone.
Yeah, I agree.
So kind of along those lines with the language, when they're talking about Cece's coming out party, and Fran talks about Disneyland, the phrasing, "You and your special friend can now
Hmm.
dance at Disneyland." That
Hmm.
seemed very dated to me.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Um, Again, like Cece's apartment just felt very 90s to me, just in terms of the decor.
It just felt very cold,
Hmm.
impersonal.
Yeah, but dated, for us in
Yeah,
2022.
yeah. Although she did seem to have a really great view
Hmm.
in the
Now,
the windows.
what's
Go ahead.
interesting too is that the whole prompt for Fran to find a business card. Um, I mean, I have a business card, but I don't like necessarily pass it all the time. But it doesn't have my home address on it.
No, no, that
So
seems like a poor choice for most
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Um, I have one big, big one. So if you have any other specific ones, I'll let you finish your
Oh
list off.
nope, you can go ahead.
Kind of the entire plot of this episode is sort of dated
Ah, yeah, the whole.
because,
Um,
you know,
mhm.
if Cece was pursuing someone to invest in a show, the person being like pursued as an investor would be really stupid to not Google who is CC Babcock
Yeah.
before like think like and who is Maxwell Sheffield before like going to this guy's house before contemplating making any sort of investment, because who knows, they could have been total swindlers, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And nowadays, guess what? He would have found a uh Facebook profile, an Instagram, TikTok, take your pick, whatever social media, a LinkedIn profile, um, whatever profile that would have shown who Cece is.
Yeah.
And Cece and Fran look nothing alike.
Nope.
So
They do not.
it would be very hard to pass Fran off as Cece.
Yeah, I agree. Um,
Now that didn't take away from my enjoyment of this episode, for the record.
hmm.
But it was something that occurred to me as I'm watching, like this probably would not go anywhere today.
Yeah. And the other part of that, now that I'm thinking of it in terms of plot, is also like this whole idea that, of course, you're going to try to, at first, the plan was to use Cece, but oh, he's a ladies' man. Let's like give him a woman to whatever. Like, I'm sure it still happens today, but I feel like it's more frowned upon rather than run of the mill, if that makes
Oh
sense.
no, that's fair. Probably less open.
Yeah.
than it was here.
Yeah. Because it's, I would like to think it's not as acceptable these days. To,
One would hope.
one would hope.
So yeah. Um, shall I jump into future fun?
Yes.
I have a number. Um,
Okay.
so I'm going to start with more minor things. So a couple small inconsistencies for the future. So at the beginning of the episode, as Fran's giving her tour, she says, "And this is the very piano once played by Marvin, the way we were Hamlish." As we learn, as a sort of established in the episode, Val's boyfriend, Cece and Maxwell don't know Marvin Hamlish. Like, that's a plot point in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
So that's point one. Point two, as Fran continues the tour, she says, "And this is the famous Sheffield guest bathroom. I don't want to drop names, but Liz Taylor did not leave white diamonds in there." In the episode in season 5, I believe, Who's Got the Pearls, Fran makes a huge deal about meeting Elizabeth Taylor, which seems like if she had been there and been in the bathroom and Fran knows about it, she probably wouldn't have been as excited and maybe would have said like, "Oh, it's nice to see you again," or fawned over her in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Also on the note of giving tours of the Sheffield family home, we learn in season, I think it's season 5. Yeah, it must be season 5, that Niles sometimes, when the Sheffields aren't home, does tours of the Sheffield house, claiming that it used to belong to Jackie O.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So let's see. So I kind of have these in order of how they happened, but so as we talked about before, Fran says, "Mr. Sheffield, they want to give you their pishki," and Frida's there, and Maxwell says, "I'm sure she's a lovely woman," and Fran's like, "No, the pishki is their winnings from cards." As a wedding present for someone, Yetta gets them a human bread maker. So
A human bread maker?
they do not make bread out of humans, but it is a human person who makes bread.
Interesting.
So just kind of like, they want to give you their pishki, and Maxwell thinks it's a person. When Yetta says to the person she gets the present for, "I got you a bread maker," you're thinking of something you put, an appliance that you put on your like kitchen counter, but no, it's a human.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we so there's reference to going to the Rainbow Room. This is a restaurant that is referenced a number of other times. As we saw in this episode, there was a reservation for dinner that never happened. In the future, I think there's at least one other reservation for a dinner date and a reservation for a party that never happened. I don't want to give any details on that. We will meet Cece's brother, Noel, I believe in season 3. And then the last one is kind of a minor point. This is not the only time Sylvia tries to stick her head in the oven. The next time she opens the oven, sticks her top half of her body in, and then comes out with some sort of dessert. I don't remember what. But so her over the top reaction happens again. So yeah,
Okay.
I believe it's time to rate the episode.
Yes.
Is it my
And
turn to go first, or is it your turn?
it's my turn.
Oh, thank
It's an,
goodness.
it's an even numbered episode, so I believe it's my turn.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you keep track of who goes first, because I clearly don't.
So I think I'm going to give this episode a 4.5. Because it was enjoyable. There were some things that kind of knocked it down a bit. So it wasn't my favorite, but it was still, it was interesting to see Fran try to be Cece. um, but yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I'm probably going to give it a 4.5 also. I think it's an amusing episode. As you put it, it's funny to see Fran try to be Cece and just the hilarity that ensues from that. I didn't really care for the character of Charles Haste. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's kind of
Yeah.
unpleasant. Like, I didn't care for his comment about, does she ever wear pants? Because then I'm out.
Yeah.
I didn't care for the fact that he had designs on Fran, who he thought was CC. I didn't. I, I'm sort of torn on the running joke of CC being referred to as a dog. Like, I don't like that
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
like as a woman, but also like it is funny how many different ways they could make the joke. So like,
Mhm.
yeah, um,
Yeah.
it's not as good as the episodes we had the past couple weeks. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I think a 4.5 is right. I do like that we see CC's apartment, that we
Mhm.
do get to see CC's apartment. Um, that
It's
still
like a
sounds
new
weird in my
tongue,
head.
like a new tongue twister. How many times can you
Exactly,
say that we get to see CC's?
exactly. But we get to see it. I don't think we see it again. Um, or at least I can't think of another episode where we see it. Um, so I like that. I mean, we don't see too much of the kids. Um, I did like the pace of the episode. It was
Mhm.
it was a much faster pace, even though the scenes were much longer.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
I think I'm gonna stick with a 4.5. I can't force myself to give it a 4.75. So I mean I
It's
also
all up to you. And on our season 2 wrap up, you're always free to adjust if you so choose to at that time.
yeah I know I think I'm gonna leave it. I think I'm gonna
Okay.
leave it for now. I mean, again, the fact that it's sort of a dated premise did not affect my score because I did enjoy it. Like it's a fun episode to watch.
Mhm.
I just I didn't care for I didn't care for the things I've already mentioned. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
so
Okay.
do you have anything else or are we good?
I'm I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 31, Stock Tip.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also find us, or you can also send us email at a fine time nanny revisited at gmail.com. Have a great week.